Hello, hello, Heal with Gold show. Where are my friends? I am so excited to see you. You know what? This waiting a whole week to come live is too long. I like when I do two shows a week and I get to hang out. Hi, Marina. I get to hang out with you guys more often than once a week. I really miss it. We need to do something about it. As you guys come in, please say hello because I see that there's already a bunch of people. But if you don't send me a note, if you don't tell me who is, hi, aloha, salud. If you don't tell me who you are, hi, Mary, I don't know who you are. And I love to say hello. Hi, Jerry. I am so happy. I'm so excited to bring Lianna and Hilary to you. I have scheduled this interview many, many months ago, and I could not be happier to bring some people that really they have two women. They have the potential to open up your eyes to some incredible higher-end, a complete transformation. And after I introduce them to you, I'll tell you a little bit about my husband's journey with changing his diet. But I want to bring them in first because they are here in the waiting room, waiting to come and say hello to you. I'm bringing Lianna and Hilary. Please say hello and welcome them as you always do.
Hi, everybody.
Hi. So, Lianna, let's start with you. Give a little bit of an introduction about you and how we were introduced to each other, and then we'll talk about Hilary.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having us, Miri. So I'm Lianna Levine-Reisner. I live in Manhattan in New York City, and I'm the mom of 3 kids. And when my kids were a little younger, I was trying to figure out, what do I feed my kids so that we can be healthy? And in the process, sort of stumbled upon some incredible information that would change me forever and give me a lot of passion for talking about nutrition with everybody, even though I'm not a trained nutritionist. I'm not a licensed dietitian, registered dietitian. I'm not a licensed clinician. But I've come to just really enjoy talking about food, preparing food more than I even had before. And it's because I realized that food has the power to heal, as you all know from the title of our session today. And I didn't recognize this before. I didn't understand that food was such a live element in our bodies until I learned about this information. And, you know, for me, I'm the daughter of a physician. I grew up in a very health conscious home. I grew up with a lot of scratch cooked meals. And I also grew up with a chronic disease, and that was endometriosis, which for me, you know, for many women, I think this is a common experience, very heavy and painful periods, debilitating enough that I would have to leave school, I would have to leave work, I would have to rethink how my week and how my month was going to go based on what was going to happen when the period hit. And it also changed how I thought about my career. I wanted to be a teacher in a classroom, and I thought, how could I possibly do that when once a month there would be a few days when I just couldn't do it physically. And over time, you know, I came to cope with it. And our pharmaceutical response from the medical establishment is to, you know, put most women who have these kinds of issues on the birth control pill, which will do some help in some ways to regulate the hormones, but also introduce other complications. And for me, in a family that has a high risk of cancer, I didn't really understand that I was introducing further risk of cancer by even being on the pill itself. So I lived with this condition for almost 20 years before I found new information, and I wasn't even looking for it. I actually, at the very beginning of my food journeys, decided to take dairy out of my diet along with gluten. And within 2 weeks, I had a completely normal period that was 5 days long rather than 7 or 8. I had no pain to speak of. I didn't have any diarrhea, which was a very normal part of my experience of bleeding. And I just said, what the heck just happened? How could this be possible? And over time, as I came to learn more about food and its healing power, I recognized that it was those the hormones that are naturally occurring in dairy, whether, you know, dairy products have added hormones as well, but dairy is always going to have hormones in it because it comes from a nursing or lactating cow. And those hormones which flood our body do something to our body. They don't just go through us. They don't just give us calcium. They don't just give us fluid. They give us the estrogens and these other compounds that play with our system in certain ways. And to me, when I found out further information about not just dairy products, but also about animal products and processed foods, how they play with our system as well, I said, wow, this is such a huge light bulb for me as somebody who is educated, who's privileged, who has connections, to suddenly have a completely different experience in my body that was something that nobody had ever told me about before, which I could draw a complete parallel to with food. There was no question in my mind that this happened because of the changes I made to what I was eating. It really just opened my eyes. And on top of that, after I chose to eat a primarily plant-based and an unprocessed diet, there were other things that changed within me as well, which was, less moodiness. I lost weight very easily. I have 3 children, and after my second child, I had a lot of extra weight on my body and didn't know how to shake it off. And I went to a trainer, and I was trying to get in shape, and I just felt so like I was not in my own skin. And within 3 months after changing what I ate, I lost 20 or 25 pounds, and I'm a small person. I'm 5'2", so that's a pretty significant amount of weight. And I didn't exercise at all to achieve that. It was just what happened when I put different food into my body and my body responded. And what it meant to me was that that the body is this like healing machine, if only we allow it to be. That we have to sort of get out of the body's way and allow it to sort of heal us from the day-to-day damage that we might sustain. It's programmed to do that. And it was just incredible to me that this could happen. So some other very interesting symptoms that I dealt with that I no longer have, you can probably include these in things that you personally experience: bad breath, body odor, joint pain, mucus and allergies. All of these things are things that have reduced to the lowest common denominator for me. I don't smell the way I smelled. I don't sneeze the way I sneezed. All of these things have changed, and it's because of food. And so I feel very compelled as a person who has seen such incredible shifts to share this with others, because on the one hand, you could say, well, that's overzealous. Why would you want other people to change what they're eating? I want to be clear. You have the choice to do what you want, but it is our ability as human beings we have a right to health. And I think we need the information to be able to achieve the health that we want to achieve and to not settle for less because society around us doesn't show us a picture of health. And the norms are unfortunately unhealthy norms, yet we have normalized them. So for me, so much of this is about sort of sharing what's possible when we think about food in a new way and when we embrace it in our lives in a new way.
So I want to interject here and just tell everybody how I met Lianna. So many people in this group know that my husband suffered a stroke, and the stroke was caused because he has diabetes that we did not know. So it went on, we don't know for how long, but for a long time, and hypertension, and he ended up in the hospital with a stroke. I had been in New York because we had a hurricane in Florida, and there was this wonderful lady, MJ Canner, who hosted my family at her house. We did not know her at the time, but we literally escaped from Florida, and a friend of ours connected between the two of us, and we stayed in her home, and we stayed in touch. After my husband had a stroke, she immediately reached out to me, telling me that she has helped people, and her father, who was a physician, has helped people to revert diabetes by going plant-based. And it took a long time that she's telling me this for us to even try to make a change in our diet. And I'm confessing here, I did not go plant-based, although I eat more plant-based than before. And I will talk about why I haven't yet. But my husband went completely plant-based when he was ready. It was about a year after his stroke that I've been telling him, I want to introduce you to a friend. I want you to hear what she has to say. And then, I spoke to Lianna. And I said to him, I just want you to hear, because we're going from doctor to doctor and he's taking 8, 9 medications every single day. Maybe there is something that we can do to revert this diabetes. And all the medical doctors that we went to, they said, no, he has genetic diabetes and it cannot be reversed. That's what they said. But I refused to take that. But I want to explain to you, I'm very spiritual, and I believe that only God is the true healer. And I believe that if God wants my husband to not be a diabetic, he will not be a diabetic. And I don't care what the doctors have to say. I've seen miracles. And I know that when God created the world, he put the illnesses, but he put the medicines, and he gave us the medicines at the same time. And it's up to us to tap into that. And I see food as a source. So that's why I was telling my husband to try it. And my husband has been doing strictly plant-based and a little stricter. He doesn't have any oil at all. Lianna, Hilary, do you guys have oil at all? Like no olive oil also, right? Hilary, what about you?
I will use very, very rarely. I will use some olive oil or sesame oil, but I would say very rarely.
Right. So this is it's difficult for me. I want to fry some onions to whatever, and it's hard to fry onions without oil. But I am doing my best. I'm here to learn. I brought Lianna and Hilary because, like everybody else, I want to learn. I believe that food can heal us. I believe that we are intoxicating ourselves with what we consume. Anything that we buy and we put in a closet and it stays fresh for a very long time, there's something wrong with that, right? I mean, we're eating these chemicals. So I want to hear, Hilary, please introduce yourself and tell us your story.
Thank you. And thanks again for having me. This is it's really a great forum. So I guess come from a place of, I would call myself a recovered junk food junkie and a recovered stress addict. So stress and sugar were my vices for many, many years. 2 years ago, if I kind of go back, I had a big job on Wall Street. I had a mother and father who were both diagnosed with Alzheimer's within 6 months of each other. I had a son who had chronic medical issues since he was a baby and who was also diagnosed with Crohn's at that same time. My first husband had passed away 10 years ago, and I was still kind of, not having processed that type of information. And all of this stuff kind of came at the same time. And my body basically rebelled, and it just said, can't do it anymore. And when I tell you, and this is not an exaggeration, I would eat probably 4 to 5 candy bars a day minimally, and maybe 2 bags of chips and maybe a salad somewhere in between. And I never was really fussed by it because I was never a large person. I mean, I too am 5'2", but I was never particularly large. My cholesterol always seemed fine. People used to bring candy to me in meetings and make jokes and be like, oh, it's not a problem for you. And they would just, it was like a thing around, how poorly I ate, which in retrospect is kind of sad. But I think it all just took a toll on me. And 2 years ago, I was actually on a trip in Europe with my daughter. And again, as I mentioned, my husband had passed away, 10 years earlier. And, she was with me. It was the two of us, and I couldn't walk. I literally could not walk. I ended up in a hospital in Spain. They tried to diagnose me, but couldn't. And I had acute issues at that point. And I had had some little symptoms here and there, probably for about a 5-year period. But, Eastern and Western doctors are a bit different, and that couldn't be diagnosed because I wasn't sick enough. So nothing could really diagnose what was brewing in my body, as I learned. At the time, when I got really sick, I couldn't walk, I couldn't sit, could not hold a pencil. I had severe brain fog. I had very little energy. I had anxiety. I had mild depression. I had vitamin deficiencies, including scurvy, you name it. I had elevated markers for inflammation. I had low libido, and I just didn't know who I was. I think Lianna used a term, which is you weren't in your, like you were out of your own skin. You felt so uncomfortable. Like I didn't want to live my life like that. I felt so uncomfortable. And I was just not happy. And I innately, I think of myself as quite a happy and upbeat person. So many doctor visits prevailed. I had, went to about 50 different visits across 15 doctors, second opinions, blood tests, 7 MRIs, CAT scans, endoscopies, colonoscopies. Long story short, I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease, as well as a leaky gut and something called, let's just say, the simple term would be I had bursitis and tendonitis everywhere. So every MRI showed inflammation across all of my body parts. I had a tear in my glute. I had a sprain in my ankle just from so much pressure. And so the doctors wanted to put me on heavy duty, biological drugs. And I was very focused on, why is this happening to me? Like, surely there has to be a reason. I didn't just at the age of 50, come down with all of this. And I knew something was brewing. And kind of, if I really thought about it and listened to my body at the time, I knew I was eating horribly. I knew I had too much stress in my life, but I didn't want to believe any of that. I just kind of wanted to say, well, no, I'm okay. Like, my body can handle that. But the reality is my body could no longer handle that after many years of abuse. And so I just started to do a ton of research. And I guess the first book that I found was How Not to Die by Dr. Michael Greger, who many of you may or may not know. But that book kind of got me started on a craze, a research craze, which is my nature anyway. I love research. And I sat with my doctor. And by the way, what's really interesting is that, many doctors, as many of you probably know, less than 25% of medical schools offer even one course in nutrition. And I went to many doctors, but with myself, with my son, and with my first husband. And in this particular journey of mine, I actually went to 2 GIs as well as many others, and not one doctor, and I don't blame them, but not one doctor asked me what I ate. So I would say to them, I'm having a lot of stress and I eat really badly. And they're like, no, it's not that. Okay. So as I went on this journey, I finally got to a point where I said, you know what, I need to take my health into my own hands. And I, through many different venues, everything kind of brought me to a whole food plant-based diet. So I decided to go, I started off going sugar-free. Then I went to, I took out gluten. I stopped drinking alcohol. And I, at that point, went totally whole food plant-based. And I will tell you, as part of all of my issues that I was having, I had gone to a neurologist. Having 2 parents with, Alzheimer's and having severe brain fog, I thought for sure that I had early Alzheimer's. And so I had gone to the doctor as part of my doctor rounds trying to figure out what was wrong with me. And she had said, she did all the tests and she said, don't think you have Alzheimer's. She checked in on me 6 weeks later. And I kind of had put that aside as just like one of the many things that weren't right with me. And after changing my diet, she had checked in with me and she said, I just want to check in how you're doing. And I kind of was like, I said, the brain fog's gone. Like, I don't have brain fog anymore. And she was like, oh, like what changed? And I said, well, I know that you may or may not this may or may not resonate with you, but I changed my diet in totality. And she said, well, great. If that works, is that working for you? Keep up with it. And I will tell you, it wasn't a short journey because when you have Crohn's disease, it's your gut is really kind of unhappy with you. You're really out of balance. So for me, I got a lot of benefits within, probably the first 6 to 12 weeks was kind of wave 1. For me, it's been a journey, but I will tell you, and I'm quite happy about this. On my 10-year wedding, I remarried, and my husband and I this past summer hiked a 17-mile mountain up 55 vertical feet. And I feel probably just as good now as I did when I was younger. But, I attribute that to really the majority of how I feel to, and I don't take any meds, a whole food plant-based diet. And I will tell you, I just got my blood test back on, I guess, late last week, and all of my bloods are normal. So for me, that is a massive, like that's how I can gauge if I may feel good, but something's not good inside. All of my markers are normal. So I've seen it. I was lucky enough to have met Lianna when I was at a book signing, or a book, Dr. Grieger was there, and I met her, and I was like, oh my goodness, these are my people, because it's somebody who will understand what I've been through and kind of what else I can do. And I, like Lianna, felt like I needed to help other people. I officially retired from Wall Street in January of 2020. And I really spend my time just trying to help others and share information, so that other people don't have to suffer like I did. And, my son is not whole food plant-based because he's got too many allergies to fully be, but he is a rare case of somebody who we've totally controlled his food, and he's not ever had to be on meds, and he's been sick since he was a baby, but not, inwardly, like he had all these diseases, but he has never had to take meds. So I too just am such a strong believer that, our bodies want so desperately to be healthy. And if we listen to them and we feed them with things that are, as you mentioned too, Miriam, it's, we know that packaged foods, by nature, the fact they can sit on a shelf for all that time and all the things that are in them, if they can sit that long, they're probably not that great for you.
Yeah. I like this question on, do you take probiotics? So tell us about that. Do you take anything aside from just food? Vitamins, minerals, like what do you do?
Lianna, why don't you talk about as a plant-based, and then I can talk about myself specifically.
Sure, yeah. I think maybe it would help for me to say, well, what are we actually eating when we say whole food plant-based diet or whole food plant-based nutrition? We actually like to stay away from the word diet because that feels like a short-term thing, and we are talking about a lifestyle, something that's longer term. So whole food plant-based nutrition as a basic definition is one that includes whole grains, legumes, which include beans and lentils and chickpeas, vegetables, fruits, nuts, seeds, and everybody is advised to take vitamin B12 at a minimum as the main supplement. And the whole purpose is to try to eat plant foods as close to their original form as we find them in nature. Not to say you have to pick them from the tree and eat them only that way, but cooked or raw, as lightly processed as possible. And the whole purpose is that every plant food has within it the most beautiful package of nutrients that our body needs to both survive on and heal itself with. So, within all plant foods, you find fiber. There's no fiber in any animal foods. Within plant foods, you find rich arrays of vitamins and minerals. And the reason we may find some of the minerals in animal foods is because the animals are eating plant foods as well. So, why go through the animal to get it from the source? And the other big piece, other big pieces, one is water. Plants are full of water, and our bodies need the hydration that comes from them. And so a lot of us who eat a whole food plant-based diet, we do eat a lot more raw fruits and vegetables than other people do. That's something that you learn to do, and it becomes a loving thing to do because it hydrates us so beautifully. And then the last piece is antioxidants and all the other phytochemicals, the plant chemicals that are what we hear, in scientific research, is the compounds that will fight cancer, that will help us repair DNA damage, that will allow us to have proper immune health. All of those things are found exclusively or mostly within plant foods, and when they're found in animal foods, it's because of the plants that they eat. So when we build our meals, we build them around color. We want to have as much color as we can because each color is a different form of vitamin or nutrient in abundance. So you get your beta carotenes from the oranges, and you get the polyphenols from the blue and the purple fruits and vegetables. And then you also we try to eat more greens. A lot of people say, oh, well, if you're eating plant-based, then you're eating rabbit food. Well, we're not just eating salads, don't worry, but we do love to put greens into what we eat. But at the core, the way that it actually becomes possible to eat a whole food plant-based diet when you're transitioning from a standard American way of eating to this is to recognize that starchy foods are not the enemy. And it's really those whole unrefined carbohydrates that are crucial for us to lean on because they provide satiety. They help us feel full. and they give us the calories that we need to have the energy to do all the things that we do. And so if you're an athlete or you're very athletic and you have a lot more calories that you're expending, or if you're growing a baby, or if you're lactating, you're going to need lots and lots of calories, and you get them naturally with these starchier foods. So usually those are the whole grains, those are the legumes, and the starchier vegetables like sweet potatoes and potatoes, carrots. And so the crazy thing is, this is a high carb way of eating. Carbohydrates are not the enemy. It's just the processed carbs that are, because that's when you take away all of the great nutrients that are naturally within the plant foods, and you just leave the starch behind. So when we do that, the body is quicker to absorb it, and that's what often leads to disease. So when the question is posed, do you take probiotics? Well, the answer is, well, a lot of that good stuff comes from the plants themselves. And then, yes, some people do take probiotics because it helps to transition the gut microbiome from one way of eating to another. And the healthier that microbiome is, the better off we all are. And Hilary has a lot to say about this because she studied this more in depth, I think, than I have. So.
As Lianna said, I actually take, I will say, I do take B12. I also do take D3. I take it for lots of reasons. It also is great. The research for COVID, it's actually helpful, but also it's also great for Crohn's disease. So I take it for that reason as well. I also take, I do not take actively. I did at one point a probiotic. I do take prebiotics. I will reference, as Lianna said, I took the a plant-fed gut course. Dr. Will Bulsiewicz has a book called Fiber Fueled. He also offers a really wonderful course, and actually a lot of conversation, a lot of questions around pre and probiotics. I think he would suggest, as a gastroenterologist, that prebiotics are much more important than probiotics. I have taken probiotics in the past, and I think his view is if you are going to take a probiotic, you should be taking one that is of very high quality. He would say there's good, not great research around probiotics in the gut, but that if it makes you feel better and you can afford it, take it. But if you had a limited amount of dollars to spend, he would say probably spend it on a prebiotic like an acacia powder, a psyllium, or a benefiber or something like that.
Interesting. Talk to us a little bit about protein, because I remember before my husband went on his diet that I asked, where is this protein coming from? So go ahead.
Lianna.
Sure. Yeah. So it's so interesting that that we've been fed, pun intended, we've been fed many interesting myths around food and health, and protein is one of those things that seems to be on a pedestal. And the more you dig into the literature and the research around healthy eating and long-lasting cultures, the interesting thing is those cultures generally eat a low protein diet, and it's a little hard to get too much protein in your diet. You really have to eat protein when it comes along with in an animal package. It also comes with fat, and it's fat that is often a bigger trigger of disease than the protein itself. However, there's a lot of interesting research coming out related to the role of protein in cancer progression. And so not initiating the cancer, but making it progress once you have some cells that have been mutated. And it also contributes to kidney disease as well. So one of the things that we like to share about with whole food plant-based eating is that you don't have to worry about protein. Everything will be okay. And it's mostly, from what I understand, just people who are lactating, women who are nursing their babies, who need to have a much higher amount of protein in their diets. But even then, it's so much less than we normally think. If you look at sort of the RDA for the recommended dietary allowance for protein, it's just a small part, like it's about how many kilograms you weigh. And so it's 0.8 grams per kilogram. For somebody like me, it doesn't exceed more than 50 grams of protein. You can easily achieve that eating a nice array of plant-based foods.
There are one little fact, just because I think it makes it very tangible. If you had a cup of chickpeas, you're getting about 19 grams of protein. So that's almost half your protein in a day. And I just think there's a misnomer around the fact that, I mean, most plants, if not you're getting fiber and protein from just about every plant you eat. So, it's there in every bite. So I think that is a big misnomer, as Lianna said. And again, with 50 grams of protein needs, the majority of Americans, particularly the way standard Americans are eating, are getting way more protein than they need in an average day. And I think the statistic, if I'm not wrong, Lianna, is even vegetarians and vegans are getting more protein than they need on average. So I think, again, there's just a misnomer that, the meat industry is a very strong lobbying industry, and it's really out there to promote the fact that you need to eat meat and dairy to get calcium and protein.
I left a question about fish and eggs. Does it matter if somebody does part, like if somebody cuts meat, cuts chicken, but remains eating some fish, some egg, does that mean that their whole day diet is still not good because it does have that fat and it does have those hormones? Or it's better if you do just eggs and fish and just cut off the chicken and the meat? Or once you're having that, do you still have the inflammation? I'm looking from a perspective because I wanted to bring the point that there is a big difference between being a plant-based eater, whatever you call it, as opposed to a vegan, right? A vegan is against having animal for the sake of the animal. So they don't eat any animal, but they will eat processed food because that's vegan, right? But a whole plant-based eater is not going to have an Oreo and Twizzlers and I don't know, all that crap in the supermarket because it's right. Am I correct? Is that
you want to hear something funny, Miriam? I had watched a documentary, I don't know, probably 7 years ago at this point, and I thought, I'm going to become vegan for the animals and for whatever. And I was knee deep in Twizzlers and Oreos, and I never felt so bad in my life, but I was vegan. So that was not for me. That was not the right way. I didn't know there was something else called whole food plant-based eating. So I'm glad you brought that up, Miriam, because I think that is so on point.
Yes. So then if somebody says, I want to start eating better, I don't see myself giving up on my eggs in the morning. How about if they have eggs in the morning and then the rest of the day they are eating plant-based? Like, is the inflammation still there? Are the health risks still there? Or are they better off this way? I have this problem. I confess.
That's okay. Yeah. So look, here's item number one that's so important to underscore, which is the more plant foods you have in your diet with each new serving of whole plant foods, the more you reduce your chronic disease risk and the better off you set yourself up for preventing disease from happening to begin with. So we don't want to say you've got to do this 100%, no questions asked. That's the only way to do it, because that's not true. However, most of us have some kind of genetic propensity for some kind of disease. And it's just a matter of when it's going to come out. And so the question is, how can we live our lives in a way that's going to reduce our chances for that experience? For me, the thing that motivates me every day to stick with this is not just that I got rid of all my pain, but it's because I have cancer in my family and I don't want to cross that bridge in 10 years' time the way that my relatives and parents did and say, yeah, I'm going to leave it up to the wind. I really want to do everything I can to prevent myself from being in that situation. So in order to do that, we do have the evidence that eating the fish and eating the eggs, more so we have the evidence around the eggs, will continue to contribute to chronic disease. Specifically, eggs do contribute to inflammation directly. They will aggravate the allergies and the antibodies that some people experience, causing other forms of autoimmune conditions. And so, and with fish, it's the same nutrient makeup as meat. It may have less cholesterol, but or less saturated fat, but it has just the same amount of cholesterol. And so it's not exactly a nutrient-giving food. It's not going to nourish us in the same way that a whole plant food will. But what we want to say is, look, you don't have to jump right in. you can make incremental steps and give yourself time and move from one place to the next, because sometimes that sense of motivation that we get from the small win day by day is the way to do it. For other people, though, and especially those who already have a diagnosed illness, we really do, well, this is what we recommend in our work, and I'll share more about what the work is in a little bit, that people try to go as far as they can within their realm of possibility, because when you do that, you can see very quickly how the body responds. It's miraculous that people are coming off medications within a short period of time. People are having pain relief within a short period of time. And I think that's where we want to say, look, okay, maybe the gradual process is good for some, but you may find even more motivation in your life to live healthy and eat healthy if you just go all in for a short time and see what happens. So that's part of the narrative.
And I want you to know that my husband went cold turkey. He's completely whole food plant-based. Immediately in the first week, he was so constipated since the stroke. He's taking a lot of medications, so it completely messed him up. He was lethargic, no energy, and constipated. He was so constipated that we did 2 tests to see what was going on, because we couldn't figure out what was going on. He was taking Benefiber 3-4 times a day and Metamucil, and he was still constipated. And he couldn't do anything. Like, he really couldn't do much. And after the first week, 10 days of going plant-based, he was regulated. He lost weight, which was probably all of that stuff that was stuck inside of him. And he's more energetic, and he's feeling so much better. And today we went to a restaurant and we ate chicken, and he had just just nothing. Sorry. He just had plants. Like, he had like a whole wheat wrap with avocado and tomato and carrots, and I'm eating, and I'm like looking at him, how he's eating. And I said, are you okay watching all of us have, I'm sorry, fried chicken? And he's like, I am so okay. It doesn't bother me. I feel bad for all of you because I'm feeling good and I'm getting healthy, and you do what you need to do, and I'm doing what I need to do, and he's okay. He does feel more hungry, and we do feel like we need to do more beans and lentil soups and things like that to fill him up, because the vegetables is not enough. But I'll tell you, one of the big reasons even though I want to go plant-based ideologically, I understand it, I believe in it. I mean, how can you not believe? God gave us this food, and that's the food that we should be eating. Instead, we're processing stuff, adding chemicals, packaging, shipping from country to country, and obviously that's not good for us. So ideologically, I understand. But psychologically, I am very used to, maybe from the way I grew up, that you have a main dish and 2 side dishes on the plate. My plate was always like that for 50 years. I had that chicken or that meat or that fish with my vegetable and my carb. And I was taught that this is the balanced plate. When I look at recipes of plant-based, it's like one big thing. There is no main. And I started playing with it. I bought tofu, and I did it like a Moroccan recipe with tomato sauce and jalapeno, and I put it on the plate with quinoa and potato, and I showed my husband, and I said, okay, that's a plate I can handle. But then tofu is not good.
Tofu, it's probably worth talking about tofu, because I think I'd love to get your sense in terms of, when you say tofu is not good, what is your thinking there?
Isn't that bad for women because of hormones?
No.
So
yeah, I mean, Go ahead, Lianna.
No, go ahead, Hilary. You can speak to this.
There's a lot of misinformation out there about tofu, and this kind of emanates from many moons ago where there was misinformation around phytoestrogens and things like that. Even if you go to the Mayo Clinic's website and other websites today, they actually have many studies that show that actually eating soy is good for cancer in terms of prevention. And if people actually did have a breast cancer, as an example, eating soy actually can help keep it at bay. It's also very good for women who are going through menopause because it eliminates or can reduce hot flashes. And they've also, some more recent studies have shown that whereas many women who are going through menopause can suffer from weight gain, actually eating soy products can actually reduce the impact of menopause on your weight gain. So I think there's a lot of, and that actually is something too, I must tell you, Miriam, that I had misinformation about for so long. I think the one really important thing with soy products in particular and tofu is that although tofu is somewhat processed on that spectrum where you can have the soybean and edamame and then you get soy, which is in tofu form, so it is somewhat processed. The key is to get organic soy because so much of the soy that is grown in the United States in particular is sprayed with chemicals and such, which can be quite harmful for health. So eating a organic soy-based product like a tofu is actually health beneficial. And in fact, you know, I always wanted to double and triple check this. So when we had Dr. Grieger at the JCC, I asked him that question. I asked Dr. Neil Barnard that question. I've asked the Shuzais that question. And then also you can see it in all of the research today. So I'm glad you brought it up because there still is such misinformation out there about soy products. Just one other quick note I just wanted to share, which is, you know, I had shared about my eating habits, Miriam, and I was probably really one of the worst eaters. And my home, actually, I used to have very large dinners on Friday night in my home. We'd have 10 to 25 people over every Friday night. And my house was kind of the place to come for, ooh, I wonder what she's making. And when I switched to whole food plant-based, two things. One is, I lost the taste for those other things, which is crazy for someone who is wildly addictive. And let's just be really clear. Salts, oil, fats, and sugars are incredibly addictive. They're meant to be addictive. And so when you give them up, you do go through a detox, but I have no real desire for those products anymore. And I actually would suggest that with that mind shift, right? I agree with your husband, which is I do like what I'm eating. I never feel like I don't look over and say, gee, I wish I could have, because I actually feel good and I like it because your taste buds change. I mean, there is research that would suggest it takes 10 to 11 tries of eating something before your taste buds actually acclimate to it and can actually decipher if you like it or don't like it, which is kind of interesting, right? Yeah. But I now feel like I eat in way more abundance than I used to because my offering, if you think about it, the number of animals that people eat is pretty limited, but there's 10,000 plus edible plants out there. When I go to the grocery store, anytime I see something new, I pick it up because I'm like, oh, I probably could I don't know what to do with it, but I'll research it and I'm going to make something with that. And so I'm actually eating all these cool things. And I will tell you that before COVID hit, my house was one of the hottest tickets in town for Friday night dinner because everyone wanted to know, like, what was the cool new thing that plant-based woman's eating, you know? And there is a lot of really neat things you can do, but it's such a mindset shift. And I also think just human beings, change is hard almost definitionally. It feels painful when you have to make those changes. But once, like anything, you build a habit, which I guess by clinical numbers would suggest that you need at least 30 days to build a new habit. And once that new habit is built, you kind of don't really think about the old stuff anymore. So it's just an interesting point of view.
So tell me about the recipes. You coming up, I went to your Instagram page, and I have to tell you something. Based on, if you were living with me, I would become plant-based tomorrow because I saw the photos of your food and I'm like, girl, she's got it. You know, she's doing this right. I mean, each plate was like, God, is she really eating like that? It's so beautiful, so colorful, like you said. But are you coming up with these recipes? How much time are you spending in the kitchen? I mean, is this a hobby of yours?
So
I mean,
I've always loved cooking, even though I didn't cook foods like this before. But and I love to cook. So I think we have to meet people where they are. Most people probably don't like to cook like I like to cook. So my sister recently went plant-based, so I was working with her, but she doesn't want to spend that time in the kitchen, and she's also not a recipe developer. I like to develop recipes. So there are so many ways to eat plant-based really, really quickly. And, first of all, if you see my, my Instagram, we all know sadly that it's all about the picture. So I don't make my food that looks like, my family isn't eating a meal always that looks just like that. They're getting it in the pan and I'm putting it in front of them, and, it's not garnished so pretty. So, we eat like real people, that's for Instagram so that it looks appealing. But I think, Lianna can share with you what she does with her family and what I do with my family and what I taught my sister. There's so many ways to eat plentifully with abundance without spending a ton of time. So I think there's a spectrum of, those that like to cook and are comfortable in the kitchen and those that are not. And you know what? Canned goods and frozen fruits and vegetables are your best friend. And I think, so Lianna, do you want to chime in on that?
Yeah, absolutely. For me, as much as I enjoy cooking, I really don't because I have three little kids, 10 and under, and I'm running an organization and there just isn't enough time in the day. So anything that I can do to make plant-based eating as easy as possible is really critical because everybody in my house eats the way I eat. And if I want to keep everybody happy, I have to make sure there's a good flow of food. So we do things very simply, and that means, we roast a lot of vegetables, especially sweet potatoes and potatoes. We use our Instant Pot religiously. Probably I do something every day, if not every other day in the Instant Pot. It's very easy to whip up plain whole grains or plain legumes, which my kids really prefer over fancy dishes, which is wonderful because it means that we have great bases for other things. And then for my husband and me, I make fancier stews that include the mushrooms and the beets and the root vegetables. And, I'll add grated ginger or lots of garlic, things that I know I love. And what's amazing about the Instant Pot, the pressure cooker, you throw it in, you press a button, you leave, you come back, you have a meal. And yes, there's a lot of time in the chopping, but usually you can multitask when you're chopping. And you can also prepare it ahead of time and then pop it into the machine when you come home from wherever you're going to go, not in COVID days, but, it is very possible to eat well. But we buy food so differently than we used to, and produce is a much bigger deal than it ever had been for us before. We have a constant flow of greens, and for our kids to try to make sure that they get the array of nutrients that they need, we make smoothies, if not every morning, then many mornings a week, because we can throw all the greens in there along with the frozen fruit and flaxseed, which is really good for healthy fats in their diet. And, you put it all into one thing and it's quick calories and you're out the door and everybody's happy. It's not necessarily that easy, I'll say, but we learn all of these tips and tools to make eating, sort of counterculturally possible. And then it becomes second habit.
Do you eat dried fruits?
I eat some dried fruits. My go-to dessert, if it's not an apple, is dates. And I tell myself it doesn't matter that I'm eating the dates because it's so much better than anything else I could have been eating. And somebody had asked about chocolate. There are chocolate varieties that are more reasonable than others. A lot of chocolates obviously have milk in them, and a lot of them they're very fatty. Just by nature, cocoa butter is fat. But you can have it in moderation. You can certainly, we do a lot of baking with cacao powder. And if you have cacao powder and you have bananas or you have applesauce, you have sweetness with the bitterness of the chocolate, you get your chocolate fix. You can still get it. Don't worry.
A lot of chocolate, in the sense, like Lianna said, if you take a super ripe frozen banana, you take it when it's brown, you're going to throw it away. That's my best friend. I strip that peel off. I pop that in the freezer. I cannot wait for it to get frozen. Put it in my Vitamix with some unsweetened cocoa powder, maybe a date if I'm feeling crazy, and you blend it and it tastes just like ice cream, and I'm so happy. And I might put some nuts on it or some flaxseed or some, cocoa nibs. And I serve it at my house for dessert a lot. And people can never believe that it's not, that it's actually good for you.
Crazy. Now I have a question for you. Do you ever cheat?
I do.
Yeah.
I do. I mean, I'm not, because I think I've read from, if you can keep yourself in the 90 to 95% zone, I would say I cheat very rarely, but I do have one vice. And so you asked me if I ever have oils. I do use a touch of oil. You'll see it in my recipes. I use so little.
Oh my God, your cheating is oil?
Well, no, so here's my big cheat. Okay. I am obsessed with, and I still am, organic corn chips. And so I will eat those from time to time. And but you know what's so interesting? I don't want to eat them a lot. And when I eat them, I'm satisfied with a handful. And then I move on. But I don't berate myself. I don't think I'm a bad person for it. But I also don't have any interest in eating them in mass. So I'm very sated with a couple, and I just like them. How about you, Lianna?
Yeah, I don't really cheat. When I do, I have an oily vegan dish from a restaurant. And even that, like when I come home, my skin tells me that I shouldn't be eating it. So I'm like, okay, yep, I knew that. Thank you. The body talks to you a lot, and it makes it easier for me to just eat the things that I know will nourish it, because I don't want to feel that way, or I don't want to have that breakout, or I don't want to have that rash. So it's a lot easier just to stick with it and enjoy it.
That, which is when I eat corn chips, if I do eat more than a handful, my gut tells me it's not happy with me. And so I don't want to do it a lot, because it doesn't feel good in my with my intestines.
Do you ever feel dizzy when you get low blood sugar?
I don't have that issue, but I also eat a lot of fruit, and I love raisins. I love dates. In fact, I just had, before we got on this call, 3 dates opened up with some peanut butter on them and a couple of sesame seeds, and it's like a delicious snack. And that kind of stuff regulates it for me, I guess.
Yeah, and I don't feel dizzy either. I also eat a lot of fruit. I know that I feel better when I eat a lot of vegetables, so I get in the habit of eating huge salads, and I'll put everything on it, and it's just so satisfying. And I honestly, like, the times that I stand up and I feel a little head rush, like, I could count it on one hand in a year. It's really nothing.
I have that way less now than I did before, but I think it's because I was probably, if I was a betting person and anybody ever checked my A1C or my glucose before I got sick, I probably was not in a great place eating 5 candy bars a day. So I'm probably in a much better balanced position now than I was then.
Wow. Tell me a little bit about oil. Why a little olive oil? Like, how do you fry onions?
Right. So we end up not frying. Unfortunately, when you heat oil, you change it in a way that makes it somewhat carcinogenic. And also, most oil, when we ingest it, it's going to impair our artery function. It reduces the ability of the artery to dilate. And so that's why some people feel very sluggish after a very high fat meal. It's because it's actually harder for your blood to move through your body. And that's honestly a little bit scary. I don't want to scare people, but I feel like oil itself is not necessarily a terrible, terrible thing. It's just the amount that we eat it. And it's certainly, there's been a lot of writing about Mediterranean diets and how health promoting they are. And that's in comparison with the standard American diet. And so if you then compare what the Mediterranean diet does versus a whole food plant-based diet, there's even more evidence to show that you can sort of reduce the rates of heart disease and stroke and cancer when you go even farther than what the Mediterranean diet offers. So for us, oil as a definition is just the fat from the plant. It's been extracted. So we try not to eat any one nutrient or macronutrient that's extracted from a food because, again, the body can't process it the same way that it would the whole plant package. And even in olive oil, there is about 14% saturated fat. which is compared to, on the highest end of the spectrum, coconut oil, which has 90% saturated fat, which it's funny, it's sort of a health food fad right now, but coconut oil is really not healthy. Saturated fat is one of the most critical things that can drive heart disease. So, going to the other end of the spectrum, safflower oil, canola oil have very, very low rates of ratios of saturated fat, but they all have saturated fat. And what we want to eat is the whole food. So if you can have the whole nut or the whole olive or the whole, whatever the food is that the oil came from, that's where the health comes from in its whole package.
But I will share this, the question you asked me about, because I love to, many of us love to, have our onions sauteed with our garlic and our mushrooms and all that kind of delicious stuff. And I would say I make something that has that in it probably at least once a day, but we use either like a vegetable broth or water to just do that sauteing. And if you get your pan really hot and you put your onions in, and you start to get them going and they start to kind of sweat, and then the pan will get dry. When the pan gets dry, you pop a little bit of the stock on there or some water, and you can get them beautiful, really, without any oil. And I was amazed by that because I just couldn't figure out how people could get by without it.
I did that one time. It takes longer.
Yes.
And you have to really be on top of it, and you have to keep moving to get the juices right and not to let. That's very interesting. So when you dress a salad, you never drizzle olive oil on it?
Yeah, I wouldn't even think to do that anymore because there's so many wonderful, it's amazing how much I've learned from other people that eat the way I do, but there are so many amazing ways to make a delicious salad dressing. So I might use avocado. I might just use cider vinegars and lemon juices. I might use, you can put so many things into a Vitamix or a blender and end up with a really delicious, as Lianna said, if you take a really nice ripe avocado with some apple cider vinegar and some mustard and some, a date, you could put that into an onion or some garlic. You could put that into a blender and have the most delicious Greek goddess type dressing, and it tastes better.
Write that down. I want to try that. I'll take a picture. I'll show it to the group. That sounds good. That sounds good. I'm telling you, you may just get me to move to your court.
Yeah, and my go-to is tahini. Like I'll make a tahini dressing with lemon juice, garlic, and added water, and it's just so perfect.
So and a date.
You can add thyme or rosemary, some fresh herbs. It's amazing.
Now, what about nuts?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I love nuts, but they're very fatty.
So that's the thing. Nuts are okay to eat as long as they're not covered in oil or sugar or salt. And usually we tell people to eat them raw because that's where the best nutrition comes from. Even cooking them sort of denatures the fats and will contribute to sort of wearing down the nutrition. But we do tell people, hey, if you're going to eat nuts, just moderate them because in all of the plant kingdom, most foods are high in carbs and lower in protein and fat. In nuts, it's high in fat and lower in the others. And so you just have to be careful that you don't binge on nuts or that you don't build every meal with some kind of nut base. So you can make a cashew sauce in lieu of a cheese sauce, right? There's vegan sort of mac and cheese made with cashew sauces. Don't eat that every day, especially if you want to lose weight. But people who are thin and have trouble gaining weight may want to have more of them in their diet, and that's okay. So it's really just about paying attention. And
so I do, for example, I eat a decent amount of nuts because my metabolism is quite high and I need more in my diet. Otherwise, I feel like, we're just all different. So I do use a decent amount of nuts, and I do I love a cashew cream. I love it. And I do a lot of that, but I don't gob it on, but I'll put a little bit on things because I like it.
Okay. I have to tell you something. What I love about this is that the focus is not on people's sizes and limiting people with quantity. And I think that a problem that we have is that we're all the time restricting people. We're living in a society that we are restricting ourselves, and instead of focusing on plentiful, if it's healthy,
Right.
instead we go to the other end, and we're just, people have to be thin, people have to, be restricted, people have to count calories. And here is a place where you can eat healthy, unadulterated food. You don't need to count it. You're going to be the size that you're going to be. You're going to moderate it as you. No, I always say, look, I'm a bigger person, and I say I take one for the girls. I always say I'm fine with it. I have no problem with it. I give cozy hugs, and I don't have. But so I accept that part of me, but I do feel that I see things about the pains in the joints and the eczema, and I'm noticing the inflammation. And that is why I'm saying to my husband, you know what, maybe I need to join you, because it's not from a perspective of size, and it's not from a perspective of restricting myself, and it's not from me wanting to be smaller so I take less space in this world. I'm taking full space of where I am, and I think that we just need to focus on health.
Yeah.
And that's why when we booked this a long time ago, I said I want to do this the first week of January, because we are somehow more motivated and we want to take care of ourselves. And maybe this is the month where we're going to start thinking about what we're putting in our bodies, and think about more from a holistic point of view, and just, eat as much as you want, but just let's try to eat healthy foods that, were gifted to us. Here's a question. I know the answer. Do you add honey to your salad?
I don't.
No, I don't.
Yes.
I will tell you, from a sweetener perspective, I think in our world, you dates are your best friend from a sweetener. Raisins are terrific for salt, like for salad dressings and stuff. And then if you're baking, bananas, dates, apples, pears, things like that are your best friends. So it depends what you're making. And of course, it depends on your palate.
Right.
Absolutely.
I want you to tell us, Lianna, a little bit about Metro Plant, PPMNY.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about it. We will after the show put all the links so people have access to both of you. By the way, if anybody's thinking and considering to do that, go follow Hilary on Instagram, because the recipes are there and it's so beautiful, and you're going to be inspired. But also PPMNY. But tell us a little bit about the organization.
Sure thing. So this is how we met each other. Plant Powered Metro New York is the organization that we've been building for the past few years, with a mission to empower people to find better health and to overcome chronic disease with the power of plant-based nutrition. And we don't stand alone. We are one of hundreds of groups around the country that is doing this in local communities to try to create community around a different way of eating, and to build awareness so that people know that they have choices in their lives and they don't have to settle for what the traditional medical establishment tells us is happening to our bodies. And what we found working in the New York metro area is that there's just so many people everywhere that we needed to team up and become a bigger platform for many people to take action. And by the many people, those people are Hilary and our colleagues, and MJ, who you met originally, who know what this does for us. And we want to be ambassadors. We want to talk about it with people. We want to not just coach people, but sort of show a path that feels achievable, that feels loving, so that we can all go forward into some new future together, feeling supported. So what we do as an organization is we sort of build leadership first and foremost among people who already know about plant-based nutrition, and give them tools and resources to go out and speak to their neighbors and coworkers and the organizations that they're connected with. And then we build partnerships to do educational work of all different sorts. So we have been working with churches, we've been working with senior service agencies, we've been working with health clinics whose doctors are interested in plant-based nutrition and what it can do for their patients. And one of the great things we're just going to start on Thursday is we're doing a Jumpstart program, which is a way of getting a bunch of people to all commit all together to take the plunge and eat a whole food plant-based diet for a short period of time. The group this week will be starting with 14 days. We've done 21-day programs also. And we give them a lot of information and support and mentorship so that they can really make the most of it and see what happens when they go all in. And so we have done this with a few other groups before, and Hilary has been a mentor for some of the people in those programs. And the one that's starting on Thursday is for our local healthcare workers, because we want to stand in solidarity with where they've been all throughout this crazy pandemic. And also recognizing that COVID-19 itself is sort of exacerbated, the issues are exacerbated by the underlying conditions, which are lifestyle-mediated diseases, heart disease, hypertension, kidney disease, chronic lung disease. All of these things can be positively impacted by food. So we want to show up in support of our healthcare workers. And we want people to know that this is possible. That's like the most important thing for us. Showing love and showing respect for where each of us is on our journey, and then figuring out how we can achieve our vision for health for each of our individual lives and within our communities.
Amazing. We will put all of this information. One person asked that you couldn't find the share button. So let me explain. The Heal with Gold group is a private group for women. And the reason I keep it private, closed, files are not shareable from there, it's because it's a safe place, a community that I'm building where women can talk feeling very safe, that nothing that they say inside the group is going to go out. And I kept it only for women so they can feel comfortable to talk about women's issues. But this video is also on my personal page and on YouTube, and you can share it from there. The only thing is that we can't share it from inside the group because we're keeping this as a private, safe space for our members. So you can, you didn't approve StreamYard, so I'm not so sure who you are, but you can share it from my personal page. And yes, I ask every one of you to go to my personal page or go to the YouTube, take the link and share it, because this is free information that you have no idea who's going to benefit from it, who's going to hear that, get motivated to try, because they are feeling something that's not right with their body, and this can change their lives. And when I think about my husband, and if we knew, and by the way, I ask everybody, go make a full blood work, go to visit, do a health checkup, is because we never did. My husband was always very, very thin. He was always 145, 148 pounds, 5'10", and ate healthy. He didn't like sweets. So his diabetes didn't come from being overweight or eating poorly, but it came from genetics. But there was a lot, he had heart issues and we just didn't know. So I want to bring this type of information for everybody, and please share it, because I really wish that this came to me before we had to deal with my husband's stroke. And I'm definitely motivated. I think I'm gonna do at least 10 days and see what happens, or 12 days and see, I have to try.
I will commit to work with you if you want help with your eating and your recipes.
Hilary, deal.
All right, you reach out. I got you.
Deal.
I got
it. I'm in. If you're in with me, I don't feel
100% in with you.
Okay, I'm in then. Okay, goodness gracious, what is? And I said here on screen.
Here's the other thing. Yes, here's the other thing. Hilary and another one of our amazing volunteers has been working on building a recipe app with community-generated recipes. And we have just posted it for the first time today to our website, and we'll share that link afterwards so that you can all have access to it. And we're going to be adding more recipes and pantry lists and all sorts of resources that people need to the app over the next month or two and beyond, in the hopes that people really have fun. This is an opportunity to have fun with new food.
Amazing. Rebecca, I don't even know where to start. Learn behaviors and habits from a lifetime. Has me diagnosed obese, pre-diabetic, lupus. Oh boy. Rebecca, join me. I'm taking a plunge. So there is no coaching on this page. This is going to be on the PPMY MNY page. We will put all the links so you can go there and you can visit their organization. But obviously, both Lianna and Hilary are in the group. So feel free to tag them and ask questions. You know, this is what we're here for. I'm so happy that what is a good replace for bread? You don't have to replace bread. That's what's amazing, is just have whole grain bread. You can have good bread, right?
Ezekiel bread's a really nice bread, I think. I don't know, Lianna, what you think, but for folks that eat gluten, which, 99% of the world can eat gluten, but I think Ezekiel makes a nice bread.
Yeah, my husband is making his own bread.
Yeah, I mean, sourdoughs are great. Whole wheat, amazing.
He's making sourdough and whole wheat breads, and it's delicious. He makes it and everybody finishes it. The whole house smells so delicious. So, okay, Hilary, we're gonna be in touch. Yeah, we're on. Everybody, we overstayed. It's 9:10, but I'm so happy we're still going strong with a lot of people here. I appreciate Lianna and Hilary. Thank you so much. You're doing holy work, helping people be healthy. What else? What can I say? I'm hats off. Another question. What about coffee? I need milk and sugar.
Well, you can have the coffee, but without the milk and sugar, although there are great plant-based milks that you can add to coffee. If you don't like one plant-based milk, there are others to try. There are nut milks, there's oat milk,
and soy milk. It's like
so many different
milk.
Yeah.
And if you need the sugar, just like grind up a date and a little bit of water and throw it in and get a little bit of the sugar that way. And over time, you'll find that you won't need it so much. But the coffee is okay if you're on it. You don't have to start drinking coffee if you don't.
Yes, good idea. Thank you so much. Have a good night. I appreciate everybody being here. Please tell your friends about the Heal with Gold group, because this is a group where we're going to be bringing this quality information for you for free, just because I love you all.
Thank you so much, Mary.
My pleasure. Have a good one, everybody.